when we look at the current forms of government, the current needs are not met today. When we met as a group, we decided to think, okay, so what are the current issues and trends facing governments around the world? We came up with 4 key areas that we believe we're all aware of in this room. But with that being said, the current forms of government are not sufficient for addressing these challenges in a speedy way. So the size, the scale, and the scope of these issues are beyond the control of what the government is able to actually implement today. So from a needs perspective, we have decided that from key areas, there's 4 that we wanted to focus in on. So first being continuous education, flexible policy, a sense of belonging and participation for the citizens of the respective country, and lastly, the correct stakeholders actually involved in making the change that needs to happen. So with that being said, we believe that our future government needs to be agile, lean, and human-centered. So how are we going to do this? What does our vision look like? In order to do this, the core of our structure will be facilitation between stakeholders. We envision that the current world of government, the new world of government will have a division called the Ministry of Facilitation. So the Ministry of Facilitation, their job is to then curate and go out and find the stakeholders required to solve the aforementioned issues. The stakeholder could exist of citizens, corporations, supernaturals, NGOs, and academics. This is just a short list of who we believe would be able to sit on these stakeholder committees. So once the committee is formed, they will actually be responsible for determining what an implementation plan looks like and potentially also funding. This could be across of the private sector, public sector, and NGOs, depending again on what that issue is. So the job of the stakeholder committee is to create, collaborate, and coexist within the government. The government is overseeing these issues, but really it's empowering and creating transparency with this facilitation model. So let me bring a little color to this and paint an example for you of a current issue of what we think this facilitation model could fix. So if we think about space trash, so currently in the current ecosystem, we have satellite equipment in space that is deteriorating. We're all aware of this. What's going to happen? Whose job and whose responsibility is it to fix this issue? So we envision the issue getting raised through the Ministry of Facilitation. This idea will get crowd prioritized, which I'll talk about in the next slide in more details. Once the issue has been raised, it will then go to the Ministry of Facilitation to create a stakeholder group. So they will create this stakeholder group through generating a curated data via big data. So they will actually be able to correct the right people on this group. So for example, in the example of space trash, we would be able to get individuals such as Elon Musk, corporations such as Big Orbit, who are currently actually working on this issue today. So they would be responsible for collaborating and coexisting together to come up with a solution to solve this issue. So once the stakeholder committee is actually created, the Ministry of Facilitation will actively work with them to use processes such as design thinking to really get under the crux of what the issue is and analyze the problem and come to a solution by working together as opposed to individually in silos. So we're now creating this collaboration model by bringing everyone to the table that's impacted. So lastly, if we think again about space trash, allocation of funding and implementation would be based on ownership of who is on this stakeholder panel. So for example, telecoms would be involved. Again, as mentioned, companies such as D-Orbit would be able to work together and potentially fund these issues to come up with a solution. So by working together as opposed to individually, we believe that the government will empower these individuals to want to solve these issues faster. And ultimately, facilitation allows for transparency across the process. So we really need to have insight into how it's being solved, timelines, and key ownership of these individuals. So the approach is bottom up. We want to use citizens to crowdsource the data. It'll be both a proactive and reactive approach. Proactive, meaning citizens will be able to input their ideas via a specific hashtag. The government will also be able to use big data to actually get a pulse on these data ahead of time. So in addition, policy. So what does policy implementation look like? We will be lean. So we want to use technology to actually remove the current bureaucratic and inefficient processes that exist in governments. So within our team, the one common thread that we found around the world was that there's tons of red tapes within governments that slow us down from thinking about the future. So we want to remove about 50% of those tasks and actually automate them through artificial intelligence and big data. This will allow us to free up resources to reinvest in the future. Another 25% will be delivered through the stakeholder model, as I previously mentioned. The last 25%, we believe, is where we can actually focus and think about the future citizens of tomorrow. So by automating, getting rid of resources and time, we'll actually able to, as we go into here, think about the capital market regulation. Tons and tons of resources are spent here. But did it save us? No, and we were aware of the issue. So by automating that, we'll be able to get ahead of the curve. So lastly, freeing up these resources will allow us to be devoted to a braver and a human-centered solution. Continuous education. We're constantly behind the curve in terms of technology. The planet is currently heating up and melting. All of these issues, governments don't have the time because they're caught up in bureaucratic processes that slow us down. If we think about 2030, 2040, 2050, we need to become more agile, lean, and efficient, but most importantly, human-centered. We need to think about the well-being of our citizens, and as well thinking about what are the current issues that they're facing and how can we invest and devote more time into our future state. So on behalf of my school, I'm very thankful for the opportunity and hope you enjoyed it.